Hi there, welcome back to Auto Small Engine. In today's video, we have an Echo SRM 266 straight shaft trimmer. Customer complained, can't pull it over. I know for a fact this engine is completely seized up. If that's something you're interested in watching me go through and see if I can free it up, stick around.
Sounds right.
As you can see here, this unit looks to be in fairly good condition. I would really like to try and free it up because I think it's got life left in it for the customer. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure if there was bad gas put in it or it was left out. I mean, these bolts here, if you look down in here, these bolts are quite rusty, indicating it was outside or got rained on maybe. I'm going to pull the spark plug and we'll look at the condition of the cylinder. Also, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dump this gas right away anytime I have suspicions of a unit sitting in bad, outside in the elements or anything like that. Right away, dump the fuel, don't take the gamble, because even if you get it running, we don't want potential water getting right back into that engine. First things first, I want to get this gas completely out of this unit. So I was told that it ran last year, even right into the fall. So I'm not quite sure what happened. But, and the fuel actually looks decent. It may have been left out. I don't know the full story behind it. But we'll get to the bottom of it. So it's time to get to the meat and potatoes of this potential repair and see if we can see what's going on inside the cylinder. On these Echoes, it's a 3/4 if you are doing this yourself. We'll see what condition the plug is in. Yeah, that's not looking really good. See what we can see inside the cylinder. I hope you can see that on camera. You see all that water in there? That is excessive for this small engine. And that piston is completely locked up. You can see that rust there. So I'm going to put some penetrating fluid in this engine and go from there. If you were ever trying to unseize an engine at home, any penetrating fluid will work. Some are better than others. I'm a little bit biased towards liquid wrench. I love it. I've been using it for years. It does have quite the odor to it, so make sure you have good ventilation when you're using it. There are some common mixtures for unseizing engines that people have made up in the past. Diesel and automatic transmission fluid 50-50 mix is one. Acetone and I believe transmission fluid is another. I like this method because it's got the nozzle, you don't need a spray bottle, and in Canada, this is about $10 at Home Depot. In the States, south of the border, it's about $7. So this is definitely cost effective. You can use Croil, PB Blaster, but I do like this one. I'm going to coat the rings and let it sit and go from there. So first, I'm going to soak the cylinder and wash all that water down to the piston. But I don't want to leave that in there because it's going to dilute my penetrating fluid, and I really want as much of that water out as I can before I even let it sit. So I'm just going to take a screwdriver, be very careful, just lightly put it in there. I'm not going to touch the piston. I'm just going to flip it upside down and get all that penetrating fluid and water to go on my rag, just to kind of get that buildup of water out of there. That's what that looks like. We'll do it again a couple times. Flush any moisture out. Now what I'm going to do is coat these rings. Let me get a light. Hope you can see it on camera. I'm going to coat these rings. I know it's difficult to see. Some may slip past the rings. That's fine. And I am going to go have lunch and let this sit for an hour or two. So it's been about an hour or maybe 2 seconds for you. We've been letting the liquid wrench sit in here. I'll get a light in there and see what we see. As you can see, it is still doing its thing. We're going to lightly pull on the recoil and see if we can get it to turn over. A little light pull. You have to be very careful doing this. You can damage your rings. No, they're still locked. So I'm going to pull the recoil and I want to rock the crank back and forth, see if we can get it to free up. This is a patience game. This is something that you really, time is your best friend on this one. This could take hours, days, weeks. If you're trying to free it up and you're going to get rid of it anyway, the least you can do is just spray a little penetrating fluid in here and just let it sit and then rock that crank back and forth repeatedly. See if you can free it up. I'm going to get the penetrating fluid back out because I need to flip it upside down to get to those recoil bolts, and I don't want to make a mess. Take that out. Might be a bit more. Should just about do it. Oh, there's still some in there. Put a good amount in, I guess. Where does that leave us? That's good. Okay, so I'm going to start working on this recoil. So I'm going to crack these recoil bolts with a number 4 Allen. This one is pretty rusty, at least the head is. There's one here. There's one right under the muffler. And then there's 2 on the bottom. This is why I drained our penetrating fluid. One there and one there. And then I'm going to zip them with a T25. The washers. There's this one here. There we go. For these 4 recoil cover bolts, they are very rusty and I can't get my Allen key in there. So I'm just going to clean them out with a straight pick so that I can ensure the Allen key sits all the way in the fastener. The last thing I want to do is strip one of these. So I'm going to take some extra time and get everything out of them to avoid that. So I'll crack them with a 3. They're very snug. This must have been out in the elements. I'm thinking this was outside at some point or got wet. But in a situation like this, you really need to make sure the tool you're putting in there is completely bottomed out. Yeah, that's in the back. There we go. These are pretty bad. I'm going to put NECs on them going back to help the next guy. Just a bit of patience with this type of work. There we go. As soon as they're all cracked, you can zip them out if you want, but depends on your situation. If they're a fight the whole way, it's not worth it. There we go. All four are cracked now. So it should be smooth sailing. So these have been a fight the whole way. I'm really taking my time with these. I just don't want them to break in there. It's a pain in the butt to get them out. I really should be replacing them, but right now my main goal is to get this recoil off of there so I can rock the crank back and forth. Right now I can only pull it one way, and I really want to just put tension on the rings the other way and go from there. It's easy to damage the rings if you just haul on that recoil without taking your time. So pretty much, in essence, everything with this job comes down to patience. Look at that. Crazy. There we go. So, oh, got a little bit of something there. I can actually see the piston moving just a touch. Okay, that's great news. Now it could be rocking still on the rings, that little bit of play. So I'm going to put more penetrating fluid, more liquid wrench in here, let it sit for a bit longer before I put more force on the crank. So we're going to add a bit more. Let that sit for a little bit, and then we'll rock it back and forth again. One thing I wanted to go over was if you ran a 2-stroke with 4-stroke gas, straight gas, none of this would really apply to you. You've probably burned up the cylinder because the oil you put in your 2-stroke gas is what lubricates the engine. So if you made the mistake by, putting straight gas in there, that this probably wouldn't work out. This has just been sitting in bad weather, and I've seen it a few times, so should be able to free it up. I'm pretty confident on this. I'm going to start preparing it for a compression test. Once I run it, I'm going to check the compression on it, hoping for 80 plus, hopefully 100 or more. So I'm going to take the air filter off and start getting it prepped for that, because once I get it running, I want to see where it's at. Take the cover off here. There's lots of, that's pretty dirty. There's lots of opinions on how you should do a compression test on these little engines. I typically go with the air filter off, wide open throttle method. Look at all that. That's just all water in there. Wow. We'll have to clean that up. And even if we do get it running, I would imagine I'll have to remove the carburetor and clean it as well. That can wait for now, but we're probably going to have to address that. So we're going to do another seized up crank test here. Probably shouldn't use tools on this. Do you hear that? That's the piston moving a little bit. We're getting some out of it. If you use tools on this, you run the risk of snapping a ring. Simple as that. So when you have no compression with the spark plug out, you should be able to whip this engine over when there's no issues by hand. It's working on it. We'll spray a bit more. There it is. So I'm confident we're broken free. And this is just by hand, no tools. See if we can get it to do a revolution. We're getting there. some of the liquid wrench has gone past the piston rings. We're just getting more and more out of it. Look at that. There it is. And you know what? The cylinder's not even scored, at least on that side. There are some carbon deposits. That's fine. I'm going to spray a bit more. That cylinder, you can still see the cross hatches on that cylinder. At least on that one side. I'll run my camera after. There it is. That was one revolution. I think we're going to save this unit. As you can see here on the end, we're doing a full revolution by hand. So she is freed up. There it is. It'll live another day. Okay, so next step is get as much of that penetrating fluid out of the cylinder as we can before we put our spark plug in. And then we will put our spark plug in and try and run this thing. 4 spark plugs. I'm not even going to bother with the one that was in there. That's too far gone for me. So we're going to get rid of that one. I also don't want to put a new one in it for this because there's a bunch of gunk inside the cylinder. So I'm going to put a good used one in. So we'll pop that in. Go from there. I'm going to spray just a bit of carb cleaner before our first try at starting, just to get rid of this bit of residual water. If it's not doing anything at all, then we'll pull the carb and clean it as necessary. Who knows, maybe the water just stopped here, and it might be okay, but we'll address that in a little bit. So I've got some fresh 50-to-1 high test here. I'm going to give it a splash. And I'm really hoping we can get it to fire once. I'm just hoping for a pop to know that everything's okay. And if it is, then we can, clean the carburetor and put some more time into it. But first we need to see if we have enough compression to at least run it. So we're preparing for our first start. I will be running it without the air filter. And we will... Oh, I guess a recoil would help, wouldn't it? Give it a little cleanup. Anytime you have a recoil off, or at least for myself, I always like to inspect the rope. Now is a good time to change it if need be. Run it all the way to the end. And we're in good shape on this one. You'll notice these 2 grooves on the echoes. You keep this flat and they slide in over these raised pieces here. So if you flatten the bottom out and lift the cover, it should slide. That's it. I've prepped my bolts. I have anti-seize on all of them. Try to help the next guy down the road because they were in pretty rough shape and they were difficult to extract. I'll just place them all in here. Sometimes if your recoil doesn't initially slide in and everything's clearing it, just give it a little slight pull. Sometimes it needs to just line up with the receiver. Next, we'll get these in there. Snug all these in. Never go too tight. These are plastic components after all. There we go. Now we have 4 more. 2 in, well, I guess 1 in the top. There. 1 in the side. Those are your 2 shorter ones of the 4. Don't forget your washers for the 2 in the bottom. One there. A little bit messy, but you'll thank yourself down the road if you have to pull this apart again. Two. 3. And our 4th one. All right. So I got a little ahead of myself. I got fuel in there. I started priming it up and forgot all about the recoil. So now we will try our first start. So this may be a little bit smoky due to all of the residual penetrating fluid in the cylinder. But we got our switch and run. We'll give it 1 more pump of fuel. Choke on. Give it a little bit of throttle. Here we go. I'm going to run this a little bit longer without cleaning the carb. I just want to get that piston, get the rings back in order, and then I'd like to do a compression test. If the compression test checks out, then I'm going to clean the carburetor and get this thing running 100% new spark plug, new air filter. So I'd like it to run just a bit longer. Can you believe that? This thing was sitting completely seized and it runs with just a bit of liquid wrench. That's all we've done here. I guess technically a spark plug as well. Do you see all of that here coming out the muffler? That's all water, penetrating fluid, and everything that was in the cylinder. I may pull the spark arrestor if there is one on this unit, just to make sure that's clean for the customer, but I'm pretty happy. We got this thing running for really a couple bucks. I mean, we used hardly anything out of the can. So very happy with that. So we're still getting a lot out of it. That's fine. I wasn't able to get it to rev up because the string was so long. So I've cut the string on the head. So we should be able to get it going a little bit quicker now. So it's smoking a bit. There's just some residual fluid in there. I'm going to let it cool right down. You're supposed to do compression tests, preferably cold. So I'm going to let this cool right down, and we'll see where we're at for numbers on that. So while I'm waiting for the engine to cool down, I want to check the muffler out, see what's going on with it, and make sure we're okay in terms of the spark arrestor and all of that gunk coming out, I'm just going to pop these screws here and pull that piece out. So these are tight. Just one. Two. Get them out. They might be a little bit warm. They're definitely warm. We'll crack this. There we go. Then slide that. There we go. No, I don't think it's even that bad, to be honest with you. Just put these in my metal tray due to the heat. You know, it's really not that bad, considering. Oh, you can see right through that. That's perfect. I suppose if your case is severe and you have a lot of residual coming out, it wouldn't hurt to pull this prior, and then once you're all cleared out and it's running properly, put it back. It doesn't take too much for these to plug up, and then you have too much back pressure and your engine will not run. So always at least check this, but if I were to go back, I would have pulled this prior to running it after all that fluid coming out. So with our engine a lot cooler, we're going to pop the plug back out to prepare for our compression test and see where we're at. That actually looks pretty good. There's not even that much wetness on the tip of the spark plug, none at all actually. So it's burned out all of that liquid wrench. Just a little on the threads, that could have been from before. I won't burn that, so I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to show you a closer up view of the cylinder wall and piston. As you can see, it looks really good. The cross hatching is there and everything's pretty dry. Look at that. Perfect. Now that our engine is cold to the touch, we're going to do a compression test. Make sure your Schrader valve is free. We're going to thread this into the head until that O-ring bottoms out. And just a bit more, like so. Take the tester itself. There we go. So I'm going to pull this over and we'll watch the gauge here. And I'm going to pull it over until that needle stops going up at full throttle with no air filter. So here we go. So there we go. Is that 120, 130, 135? Yeah, that's perfect. Typically on a two-stroke, you need at least 80 to run. Should be at least 100 minimum, and then 120 to 150 is where you want to be. So we're right in there. Perfect. I'm very surprised because it was completely seized up, and you know, there's obviously no damage to the rings or cylinder wall if we're getting that kind of compression, those kind of numbers. So very happy with that. This is going to carry on, and this is actually owned by a landscaping company, so this thing's going to be working all summer coming up here. And yeah, I'm sure the customer's going to be very pleased that we saved this one. Happy with this one. It runs great. I don't even need to adjust the carburetor, to be honest with you. It's idling, it revs up great. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I suppose applies here. For just a couple bucks, if this does happen to you, you can do it yourself. Just pull that spark plug, put a little bit of penetrating fluid in there, let it sit. Patience is a virtue. You need to really give it time. This isn't something you want to rush or push. You're broken down anyway, so just do your best to, and you need to rock it back and forth. You want to remove the recoil and rock it back and forth. You might need a channel lock in there to kind of help you rock it. Your fingers might not be strong enough. Um, Once you free it up, you want to run all that out and then go from there. This one, I'm going to give it a full service, new air filter, new spark plug, new fuel filter, and grease the head. And this one should be good. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. It helps future small engine content. I'll see you in the next one.
Sounds right.